Hi, I'm a professional editor and I've always wanted to expand my horizons by talking to other editors and sound designers, music composers, visual effects supervisors, essentially all the magicians who silently and invisibly work behind the scenes. This series is an attempt to make the invisible artists visible. I hope you enjoy the conversations.
So here we are with my friend Pooja Tolani. She's a writer. She's a joint secretary of the Screenwriters Association, and she's a creative director in the advertising industry. Pooja, finally, you're here. Thank you so much for taking time out for this.
Oh God, thank you, Antara.
So, Pooja, we've known each other for many, many years. I've known you from college, and then we reconnected at FTII, where you were there for the screenwriting course. How did so between college, where we were doing mass communication, how did you decide to venture into writing specifically?
Um, and the thing is that I think even when we were in college, we used to do all of these assignments. If you remember, where
Yeah.
there was either like a short assignment or like the degree film that we did. So I think I was all of the things that we did in that, from shooting to editing to everything. I think I, even from the smallest exercise to the degree film that we make, I used to enjoy the writing part the most. So I guess it was sort of, I always knew that this is kind of where I'd be at. And then after we finished college, etc., I was in advertising for a couple of years. I worked in a few agencies in Calcutta, and I was a copywriter. And at some point, I decided to go and study at FTI. I think the screenwriting course was fairly new at the time. So initially, I thought of going, then not gone because job and all of that. And then suddenly, after 2 years of copywriting, I said, okay, let me just give it a shot, if not now. So once I went to study, even then I didn't know that I'm going to be doing this. I thought I'd finish the course and come back into advertising. But once I started writing in FTI, then this is basically what happened.
Yeah, okay. But so when you were working in advertising, then did you feel like you wanted to pursue screenplay writing because it's film and it was something that you kind of naturally gravitated towards, or just because it was you just wanted to study writing in general?
No, fiction was, although I enjoyed myself in advertising, I still do a little bit of advertising sometimes on and off. But I enjoyed it. But I think fiction was what and fiction as in fiction for the screen is what I actually always sort of was drawn towards. Like I said, even in college when we were doing our half an hour, 25-minute short film, I just enjoyed the writing of it so much more than anything else. So I think it was fiction writing for the screen which kind of attracted me, which is why I went there. And it was a short course; it wasn't very long. It was like a 10 or 11 month course. So I said, what's the worst that can happen? I'll just be unemployed and not earning and doing something fun for a year. And then if it doesn't work out, then I can always come back and take up a job. So that's what, yeah.
But so after FTII, how difficult or easy was it to score that first writing project?
Oh, I was one of the very few and one of the first people to get a in-campus contract almost.
Wow.
What used to, yeah, nothing came out of it. So so what happened was towards the end of the course, so we had like one screenplay and one sort of another story treatment and 3 4 other ideas which we had to develop as part of the course. Like it was a writing course. Like they didn't just teach you, they made you write, and you learned while you were actually writing. So we had a bunch of material ready, and there was this some production houses were invited in FTI, and we were sort of given this opportunity. All of us in the batch were given this opportunity to pitch ideas. And at that time, one of my ideas was actually picked up, and 3 or 4 other people in my batch also. We signed contracts while we were still in FTI, while we were just sort of coming out of the course. So I thought, "Mera to ho gaya." Why everybody keeps saying that it's tough and people have to struggle. I'm done. once the contract was signed, I got like some signing amount, and then I was supposed to go back and finish the script because it was, sort of a work in progress thing. I was supposed to finish a draft. I finished that draft and I sent it, and there was radio silence. And then the person who had got the decided to sort of take on these films moved on from there, and somebody new came, and then they just sort of said that, oh, we don't want this anymore. And we were stuck with just like one small amount. Our stories were with them. And I was like, what the hell? So yeah, it was, after that, for many, many years, I didn't sign a contract.
I was just going to ask you that when you were signing the contract, were you kind of aware of the nitty-gritties and what potential problems can occur if you're not really reading the fine print in terms of paperwork?
Yeah, a little bit, because so Anjum sir was the head of department in FTI at the time. So he, towards the end of the course, he did like 1 or 2 sessions on the basics of an agreement when you're signing.
Lovely. Right.
Which was, even to date, it's very useful. Because what he did, just because it was so new and we didn't understand anything, and he was also we are still trying to put together like the minimum basic agreement for at least new writers, etc. So he basically explained what the essentials were, what the non-negotiables almost are, and what the desirables are. So he did give us a sense, but at the same time, what's good and what's not good. But because you're new and you're just starting out, you can't really sort of play hardball and negotiate well. So, but the good thing was at least I knew how I was being exploited, which a lot of writers don't.
My God, yes.
So even awareness is so much more empowering than, because a lot of writers, just even like established writers, because I feel like they're so reluctant to get into paperwork, and it sort of is, legally scary and unpleasant, or I don't want to talk about money or terms, etc. So many people have that. So I feel like, of course, to each their own, and if that's how you prefer it, that's okay. But I feel like it's very difficult for me to sign away something without even trying to sort of understand why I'm needed to sign away something which should not be signed away. So over the years, I have been sort of constantly, I read contracts, because every time you read a contract, you find a new clause saying the same thing in a different way. You're able to understand, and then of course you work with lawyers, you work with agents, you understand what's what. I think the best way to learn is by signing shitty contracts, because sometimes in the beginning, especially, you don't have a choice. Now, sometimes for basic things, like you have to constantly like keep going back and forth, etc. But after a point, I think you figure, okay, this I can give this, but get this in return.
Yeah,
it's all about negotiation.
But you mentioned some things in a contract to watch out for, like if there's say 4 or 5 major points.
There is the essentials, and then there is the desirable.
Okay.
So in the essential, you'd have things like the fact that you get paid, the fact that you get paid on time, the fact that you get paid for crossing certain milestones in the writing, or whatever your payment structure is. Like you get paid on time, regularly, and fairly. That is the payment. And the other thing is the credit. These are your 2 non-negotiable essential things, because if you're not getting either one of these, then what is the point?
Yeah.
Then in the desirables, there are things like, what kind of visibility will you get in the promotional activities, maybe like will your name be in the trailer, etc. Although even these ideally should not be desirable.
Yeah.
But when you're starting out, then maybe these could be something.
Okay.
For example, a lot of contracts have production houses have the clause in their contract which says that the writer cannot approach their writers association, any guild or association that they are a part of, in case of any dispute, etc. Which actually, in legal terms is against the constitution, because if you're part of a union, then it's your constitutional law to approach them in case of a problem.
So there's exactly something
the
that
production house is not obligated. Sorry, I'm just saying the production house or whoever you're dealing with is not obligated to come and respond to that dispute, the call for dispute.
Yeah, but you can and should be able to approach for any sort of redressal. Yeah.
It's like saying that if I have a problem, I can't go and like ask my mother for help.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Like, who are
this
you?
is something that
I can't.
I find ridiculous, even, and we have the same thing in editors' contracts as well. And it's always a
Yeah.
question that you can't stop someone from going to the union or going to their association. So
Or
I,
going to their friend.
or going
It's
to
like
their friend,
you
yeah,
can't talk to your
or
friend about
any
it.
sort of arbitration. That is my right as an individual to approach
Yeah.
someone. But I do wonder where a lot of these clauses and contracts seem really archaic, and they feel like they probably were there like 20, 30 years ago, and no one's bothered updating the contracts.
The main reason that some of these clauses are still there is because a lot of the senior writers are still signing it. If the senior talent and the senior writers sort of come together, so a lot of them don't really have to worry too much about their contracts being watertight, or is because uh, a lot of the times these contracts don't really get exercised. The clauses in them don't get exercised because you're senior. But if you're a junior, you're starting out, or you're mid-level, then these clauses become very, very, sort of problematic. So I think the minute a lot of the senior writers come together and say that this is not cool, and that we should be signing contracts which are fairer to both parties, not just that it should only be the writers favoring the writers, but fairer clauses where at least the writers are sometimes the clauses are worded in a way where after months and months of writing also the writers are getting like maybe a signing amount or a couple of tranches and not even being paid. The credits are not fully assured. There are clauses which say that this is the credit that will be given at the discretion of the producer.
Yeah, yeah.
So these kind of things.
Yeah.
While of course the concerns of the producer regarding newer writers is fine. It has its place and it should sort of they're putting in their money and all of that, but it should still be worded in a way that is protecting the writer's interest as well, and not just sort of one. And having said that, there are a lot of production houses which are now trying to sort of have fairer contracts. The Screenwriters Association is talking to a lot of producers to try and put together like a minimum basic agreement in place, and many of them have shown sort of interest and shown intent in that sense. So it's happening. A lot of the work is sort of making headway, and we're sort of putting together minimum basic agreement documents for for film, for television, as well as for long format, which is your OTT content.
Yeah.
So there are separate sort of teams working on that. So especially the film minimum basic agreement has been in the works for a long time, for years. So a lot of sort of reasonably large established production houses have shown interest and sort of shown intent in, if not signing an MOU, then at least sort of in principle saying that, okay, yeah, this is the minimum basic that we can sort of talk about, or at least come to the table and discuss what is it that the writers should at least minimum be getting. So hopefully it will happen.
It's interesting that you say this, because most of these problems are obviously things that editors are facing as well. And in a sense, I think writers and editors almost have similar trajectories in that you are signed on for an infinite number of months or days, sometimes years. And payments are in tranches. Payments are not monthly. You may or may not get your payment after the 1.5 years that you spent on a project. And I think most times I can speak for writers and editors, most writers and editors, that it doesn't seem worth your while to kind of get into a project which is paying you over that. Now like OTT, a lot of OTT projects last a year and a half, where earlier they used to be like 8 months or something. So the monies have stopped making sense. And the tranches have stopped making sense. How does how do you kind of firstly bring some sort of organization to such a disorganized industry? Because the biggest problem that we have been facing as editors, and we have an informal sort of collective, we have not been able to bring a lot of people onto the same page, even if in theory and while everyone talks to each other, everyone's frustrated, everyone thinks they should be paid more. But in practice, it's very difficult now, because I feel it's unfair to impose कि तुम इतने में काम करोगे and you will not work for less than this, because everyone's coming from different economic backgrounds, especially like post pandemic and everything. I think it's been hard for everyone. With the SWA, how have you kind of managed, or have you at all managed to find, like, to standardize the fees across the board?
No, we haven't. But that is the intention with the minimum basic agreement. So, you're right. It's sort of impractical. Forget about whether it's right or wrong or whatever. It's impractical to expect that a group of people will, out of their own will, sort of unite and set a minimum standard, unless there is an authority or like a signing off which has been happened. See, nobody will want to work for less, right? Like, I wouldn't want to work for like a couple of lakhs lesser than you if we were both sort of writers. Why would I want to do that? But I'm doing it because I have my reasons, like you said. So, but if there is a body, or if there is like an agreement which has been reached by the production houses together, that okay, we all agree that we will minimum pay 100 rupees to any writer. That even if they're new writers, they're greenhorns, whatever. If we agree that this is the minimum that we will pay, so the minimum basic agreement is actually more designed for the newer writers, for the people who don't have enough work experience to command a certain number or to negotiate, etc. But that is to begin with. But if there was a minimum, that this is for like a budget, a film of an X amount of budget, this is the minimum that you should be giving to the writer, or this is the minimum writing fee that should be allocated, from the budget. Then if everybody has agreed, then that is the automatic minimum that you get, right? So it is very difficult. It's difficult to get like 20 people to come and attend a meeting that you hold for something like this. So forget about them agreeing. They'll all agree, but how are you going to check everybody's contracts? They'll say, "Haan, humne 100 rupees mange hai." But you can't do that. Things like basic things like you've been told that, like, you're a writer and you've been told that you'll be paid, say, 100 rupees over 10 tranches of 10 rupees each. And your first tranche is the signing, second tranche is the story, the third tranche is the step outline, etc. Now, what happens is that a lot of the money, especially when you're new and you're sort of entry level, junior, early mid level, sort of, a lot of the money is tied to approval of the material, which means that you have written for 7 months and you have kept on writing and they have not approved. Now, it's possible that you're writing shit. It's possible. And it's not to say that every writer who comes on board is a great writer and will deliver. Maybe they don't have the connection with the material. Maybe they're not right for the part, for the project, or maybe they're just not good writers, right? But if you've decided to employ them, they must have come to you with a spec for the month. A lot of young or new writers sort of also write sample for them before you take them on. But if you're taking them on, then there is a fee which ideally should be allocated for time, not for quality. There isn't. Fine. So you divide your payment structure in a way that at least the time is compensated for, even if you don't get anything usable out of it.
Yes.
So I feel like that is something that in the beginning I was constantly struggling to negotiate for. But I said, if I'm putting in 4 months of my life, and you're saying that if you don't like it, then you won't pay me money. At the same time, whatever I write still belongs to you and you can use it. So that's not cool. Either you promise me that you won't use any of it.
Yeah.
But if you're saying that, you will use it, then you pay me at least for the, for whatever work I've done, and definitely pay me for the time that I have put in.
So are you saying then like a monthly or a weekly payment is what? Because with editors in particular, outside of India, in the US, they are paying weekly, which kind of makes sense in terms of the time, the quantum of time Qualitative,
Right.
so chalo, as you said, it's a whole different conversation. But
Right,
is that
right.
something that is something we
It's
should
possible.
aspire to? Yeah.
It's possible. Like a lot of the writing rooms function like that now with the OTT platforms coming. They get a monthly fee. So if like you've been told you'll be paid 50 rupees and over or 60 rupees, and over 6 months you're getting 10 rupees a month, which is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, if you're not doing the monthly thing, or if you're working on a film which is usually milestone based payment, then at least if you were getting a 10 rupee signing, and if you were going to get say a 20 rupee or a 25 rupee on approval of the first draft, then at least you split the 25 rupee into 10 rupees on submission and 15 rupees on approval.
Right.
So that at least there is submission means at least the physical work of working has been paid for. Quality, maybe not. So maybe something like that, which is usually what most writers you sort of do in their contracts, where there is a certain amount which is for submission of the draft, and then there is another amount for the approval, after which you can move to the next draft.
Right.
A lot of the senior writers are able to get everything on submission, by the way, but that's very significant.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But you also, when you said earlier that there are senior writers who are not really reading the contract and or not really invested in kind of going through, is it because a lot of the stuff, a lot of negotiations and projects earlier were signed on like the base a goodwill basis and bato mein, bhaichare mein?
It's possible. Like, it's difficult to say case to case. It must be different reasons. Some people are not, like I said, some people, even though they're really good and they're very senior, they're just not good. They're just not comfortable with these kind of conversations. Like, I have no such issue, but they're not comfortable with talking about these things. Some people, they kind of have. They never really sort of see it happening, really, that if you're writing for something, you won't get paid, even if your contract says that you will be paid on approval, and if the film will get made. A lot of writers would not have to worry about being credited, because if you're senior and you've written a bunch of things, for example, then you will be credited. It's in the interest of the film that you be credited, right? कि अच्छा ये इसने so and so person ने इसके dialogue लिखे हैं, या so and so writer ने इसका screenplay लिखा है, तो because they've done that film or this film. So a lot of the times they don't have to worry about the credit being given to them, and therefore, and also relationships. They've been working for quite some time, then they most likely have relationships with the people that they're working with, and that sort of a thing. And they have, like you said, goodwill. They have, even if there were to be a dispute, they have sometimes maybe the bandwidth to sort of sit down and figure it out with the producer or the director or whoever it is. So it might be that, maybe. I'm guessing. Also, the sums are larger.
Yeah.
So even the signing and even everything is just larger. So yeah.
But do you think that
why.
In this whole
and
process,
I don't mean to hate on all senior actors. I'm just saying
of
that
course.
I think we're not being able to sort of find that synergy where we all come together and say कि नहीं इतना तो minimum बनता है boss.
And that's exactly because even with the editors community, you have senior editors who are able to command a certain price and get their contracts also kind of negotiated easily. I think what happens in all cases and is that the younger lot, I think, is pretty much at a disadvantage because one big issue I find, and lately we've been having these conversations, one big issue is that the newer lot are very afraid of losing work.
And I don't blame them. We've all been through that that phase where either we need the money or we need the work, or because work gets you work, right? If you've not worked, then what is it that you're doing here? So absolutely, it's exactly the same for writers. And the worst part is that the writers always are brought on right at the beginning, right? And it is a minimum investment, because the writing fees are so low. There is no other overheads, no other costs. The writer is going home and writing with their own. You don't even have to pay for the bloody electricity which they are consuming for on their laptops for writing your drafts, which is why things get developed left, right, and center. 20 things get developed, 2 things get made, and also a lot of the times the content is really not respected enough, because a lot of people feel कि लिखने में इतना क्या ही मुश्किल है, because it doesn't involve equipment, it doesn't involve, and you have sat with the writer for 5 days and given them like 2-3 ideas, you feel like you've co-written. That all of that happens. So the craft of writing itself, I feel, is a little, not little, very under respected. Sometimes even by writers themselves, because like you said, they undercut themselves, each other.
Yeah.
They don't feel like confident enough to say that, okay, I'm going to do something good with this, so pay me more money. So you're absolutely right. Not judging the newer writers who are obviously more desperate for work, but that's
No, and
the worst part is it's such a cheap, sort of. It's a cheap work, no, in terms of like it really costs nothing.
Yeah,
it costs nothing. Like if you're shooting for a day, it costs a lot, because you've got all of these departments coming together. There's tangible, costs.
Yeah,
the cost of this is nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like with edit as well, if you just put one iMac in a room, actually it's minimal cost, which is why there is also a possibility of editing. Now, actually, it's a lot more streamlined, because with OTT we have network cuts, so you are accountable in that sense. But definitely, I think it's in terms of respect also similar, that it kind of, you don't know, with editing in particular, like you don't know when the writing starts or stops and the direction takes over, and direction starts or stops and editing takes over. So even editing credit is like that only, that no one knows what an editor is really doing or how the editor is contributing. But tell me, as a writer, have you ever had like a very strong reaction to anything that you have written and then you watched in the edit?
I can't use the names, of course. I can't. Of course, absolutely. I mean, there is a bunch of stuff which has not come out also, which is, I'm like, thank goodness.
No, because I always find it really interesting when I have writer friends who've written a project and then they come to see it in the edit. And I mean, the nature of edit is such that it will change, right? It's not going to be what one has started off writing. So I am always very amused by, inevitably, it's like, but this is not what I've written, or, you've killed all my punchlines and you've killed all the best dialogues. But how are you able to kind of resolve and find your peace?
No, so the thing is that, see, sometimes, like I said, there are some things which we will not talk about because some of them will not come out and all of that. But for example, with Sacred Games, there were many things which, sort of were, we had written it a certain way, and then when it came out very differently. See, that some parts, in fact, I thought came out better than I had written them. And then there are some parts which I felt like I don't agree with this. But at one point, it is very important, and I think it's the toughest thing about being a writer, that after a point you have to let your, like you have to let your child go out into the world and just follow their life's trajectory, right? It's the material that you've written is not the film or the show. It is the script for the show. It is not, so it's the director's sort of prerogative to do what they will with it. So at one point, you have to sort of acknowledge that, or then direct it yourself otherwise. So, like I said, there are many things which happened differently, or they came out differently, and not just only because the director decided to do it, but sometimes, you've written something, but on the day of the shoot, and we were there for the shoot most of the time, right? So I saw what was happening. On the day of the shoot, the realities have suddenly changed. Like, you can't shoot a certain way, you can't do this or that. And then obviously now what are you going to do? Like, you make it work, and then you wonder if, if you had been able to sort of shoot it that way, would it be better, or is this better? Like there was a sequence in Sacred Games, for example, which was tonally sort of treated very differently from how I had written it. But when it came out, a lot of people really appreciated it.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, maybe there is a, like they really liked it, and I couldn't sort of, at the time, I couldn't see why it was being treated in that sort of tone. But now when it came out, a lot of people liked it. And sometimes you wonder if you really do know the best just because you've written it. Sometimes I think it's a mix of both. Sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't like it, but you have to accept that it's not always going to be what you have written. That's part of the, like, that has now stopped really bothering me so much. While a lot of things have happened where I've been like, what the ye kya hai? But this is not what I had written.
Right.
But like, for example, and it's fun also sometimes. Like there was this one scene where in Sikri, it's a very tiny thing, where Trivedi's character is talking to Gaitonde on the phone, and he's saying ki ye kya kiya Ganesh. And we were shooting that, and he was smiling and saying ki ye kya kiya Ganesh. And I went and told AK that, do you know what he's referring to? Like, so he said, no, because the thing is that it's so vast, the material, that the four of us sort of put it together. And like we were shooting it, and I said that, ye tone, this is what the incident that he's referring to. And he was referring to, अभी now जिस कोई देखने वाला और तो नहीं है, मैं बोल ही दे रही हूँ, who cares about spoilers now. But like Gaitonde's character had killed Guruji, and Trivedi was referring to that with a smile. So I was like, why is he smiling like this? Like he's talking about like the most horrific thing that has happened in the show. So then we were like, oh no, we can't do that. So these are things that sometimes happen, and then of course, thankfully, like we were all there and we sort of noticed that this is happening. But, so sometimes you wonder that what the hell happened in this. It's okay now. Like there was an entire sequence for Kalki's character which we had written, but that couldn't happen for logistical reasons, etc. And like I really begged everyone that please shoot the sequence. It's so important, and it would be so important for the character development. I really begged them. But, practicalities, logistics, whatever, they couldn't shoot it. So it's not, now what can you do?
Yeah. But so you mentioned something very interesting that I wanted to ask you about. You said you were talking about tone and how writing and then direction, performances, all of that determine tone. So one thing that I've kind of struggled with, particularly I think since with the advent of OTT, is that between scenes, because we're trying to fit in a lot within 32 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever the format may be. And a lot of times, because OTT allows for multi-character narratives due to its format, I find that there are a lot of tone jumps between scenes. So if you're dealing with, say, like a comedic scene, it's very often followed by a dramatic scene, and the beats keep changing, and that becomes a real problem in the edit. How do you generally approach, like when you're given material to write? How are you kind of determining tone, and like any idea why these kind of tone jumps would happen?
Can't say specific lead to what you're referring to, obviously. But I feel, especially with OTT and long format, what is happening is that there's not one writer writing the show, right? Because it's just so much work that it's not possible in most cases for one writer to do it. In most cases, it's at least two, three. In our case, it was four writers who sort of did it. So generally, a room should ideally be constructed in a way that there is one lead writer who sort of whom the buck stops in some ways.
Okay.
So even though everybody's doing their job and sort of putting in their scenes or their episodes, however you choose to divide the writing, at the end of it, there's one person who's sort of reading all of it and sort of glossing over it in a sense that, okay, like, for example, with Sacred, what happened was that each of us wrote 2 episodes. But what happened before that was we spent several months, sort of talking to each other and and discussing every beat and sort of breaking down the scenes and breaking down the episodic beat sheet, etc., so that we were all on the same page. Like we had this humongous Google Drive which everybody had access to, and we kept piling it in with like a lot of stuff about character work, about backstories, about just random scene ideas, research, all of that we did. So that legwork that we did before the actual writing of the episodes, I felt sort of put us all on the same page in terms of tone.
Right.
First was that, and secondly, when all of us finished writing, because it's not possible that I will write like say my other like Nihit or Dhruv or Varun will write like me. It's not possible. We each have our specific style. What helped, of course, was that there was a character, at least the two main protagonist characters, sort of tones were already set in the first season.
Right.
But even if they were not, we would have decided to have set it before we actually wrote. So that I feel would help in making sure that the tone is. It's possible for you to have various kinds of scenes in a show. But if it's feeling off tonally, that one moment you were in a certain zone and the other, you went into like a different genre, and that's not helping the narrative, but actually, jarring, then obviously the legwork is what is one sort of way that you can fix it. And the second again is that once it's all written, then ideally like the lead writer or someone takes it, like Varun took our episodes and then he just sort of give it like a sort of a brush, that there were many things he did, like he took one scene from one episode and put it in the other, because that also sort of kept, like he was also editing before it got what. So all of that helps in making sure that there is like a sameness to it, which is, I did another show which hopefully will get made soon, where we were 3 writers, and that's exactly what happened. Like, we did a lot of research, first of all, because it was based on a true incident. And then we spent a lot of time working on the separate tracks and the separate character arcs. And then sort of we did that, the index card exercise.
Yeah.
We did it forever till we were happy with it. And then at every stage we were co-writing. Like I was doing the beats and then I was putting it out there for the other two to read and give their notes on. So this constant same page sort of thing. And then after it has been written, before it goes to shoot, which is why most good shows take like 8 to 9 to 10 months to a year to get written. Because it's all of this process, and it helps that if there are more writers in the room, more ideas come in. But at the same time, more voices come in. And then at some point, you have to collate all of the 4 or 3 or 2 voices. And then once it comes out from, that pipeline, it has to be one unit. Like it should sound like one person has written it.
Yeah.
So I think that is how tone sort of, and then of course the director takes their spin on it, etc. And then it comes to you, and then you, I mean, it's like I don't know, like making a chair out of wood.
It's also actually a little bit like Chinese whispers. Because
yes, I was trying to be optimistic and like all poetic.
No, because now, especially with Netflix shows, we are also sometimes 3 editors. Who are right. So with Delhi Crime season 2, we were 3 editors. Right. But again, it kind of helped because we were also jamming. We had a WhatsApp group and we were constantly talking, discussing, which is, I mean, a really great experience from me on that project.
So how does that sort of determine tone, for example? Like, did the 3 of you sort of at first decide that this is the kind of treatment that we are thinking, we'll keep it pacey or we'll keep it slow? I've not seen the second season, but I'm just wondering, was there like a conscious sort of aim that, okay, let's keep it pacey? What is the jargon that you use to keep it non-pacey, pacey?
No, I think for tone, again, we had a precursor. So we had season 1. So we know ki acha zone mota ye hone wala hai. But again, because the plot was very different, and it was hitting different emotional, nerves, so to speak. I think we spoke a lot. In fact, with the director also, we spoke a lot about the overall tone of the show. And then, the mini arcs, so to speak, of each episode is what we kind of determined for ourselves, because each episode rhythmically was very different. And inevitably, like the first episode will be, I was doing the first episode. I know the first episode will be very different from the rest, because it was just setting up the plot. And it was actually a very ambient sort of episode, is what the director and I were aiming for. Because actually nothing much happens except setting up the plot. But for Mahal, the world building is what we were really keen on doing in the first episode. And it kind of has to suck you in. Other than just the obviousness of the plot, the ambience has to suck you in. And then you kind of stick around for the rest. So these smaller things we kind of discussed and did our own sort of thing. Then we watched a little bit of each other's episodes also. But a lot of discussion, I think, definitely. एक तो I feel problem, I feel एक तो the problem which I had earlier, and I think this is also for writers and again for editors also, because we are used to doing feature length. Outside, like in the US, for instance, the people, the writers and editors who work on these shows, and I'm talking about series in particular, I think they have a television background, but television for them is very different from television for us. So, and we were all feature people who are coming into writing series or editing series. I think that ethos is so different that it takes time to rewire.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. Writing a film is not the same as writing a show. I mean, sometimes the process is exactly the same. Sometimes the beats are exactly the same. But when you actually, get down to the writing of the episodes or breaking down of the episodic arcs, it's not the same. The beats are very, very different. Like the kind of beats that you have to hit at, like, the structurally basically very different. And in fact, when you were talking about how you all talk to each other basically, or watch some of each other's episodes, I think that is the way that the sameness or that one voice can be achieved. Because I also remember now that when we're doing Sacred Games or even the other show that I'm talking about, so if there are, say, 8 or 10 or 11 main characters, what we did was that I took 3 or 4 characters and the other person did. So we did character beats of the entire show. One person did that. Of course, the other, others could sort of add their ideas while they were writing, etc. But even though I am not writing all of the episodes, I have sort of charted out the arc of one character, so which we all agree on before we start writing the episodes. Which means that if I'm writing an episode in which a particular character's got a very important scene, and you have written that character arc episodically, then I will stick to that unless I have a better idea, which I will of course discuss.
Right.
So that also kind of, then we're literally sort of like, making choti with different strands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because also this thing that you said about scenes, restructuring scenes and stuff. So I did a show recently where, so I had 3 editors who were editing 2 episodes each. I did the first and the last episode, and the rest kind of did alternate episodes in between. And then I did a kind of run through on all the episodes. And this is the first time I actually managed to get myself a structure like that in the edit. And as you said, like, it was very helpful to kind of get a bird's eye view of the series and kind of switch things around. And like some things work better here, some things work better. You can use little resonances from various episodes like that. So I totally get that. But like with what you were saying, like for feature writers, I used to notice initially early on when OTT had just come in, there was this tendency to have still kind of aim for that interval point. कि वो episode 4K या 3K उधर ना, there'll be like that interval point feeling where now the story is starting. Jabki the nature of OTT kind of dictates that the story would start in episode 1 के 5th minute में, bas you should be in it.
Absolutely. I have a very funny, something very funny happened with me. I was writing the story for one platform, and whatever, then give me like a brief that this is what it is about and all that. So I did like a story of, and once I had like an overall 5-7 pager, I then developed like an episodic story. And then we went and I was narrating to the person, and she so we were I was narrating the first episode. I narrated, this is the story of the first episode, this is the story of the second episode, and I was on the second episode story, etc. And then she just looked at me and said, what is the episode 4 freeze? So I was like, episode 4, it's an oddly specific question to ask, right? So I said, episode 4, please, I don't know. So she's like, babe, the paywall comes up at episode 4. So I was like, I do not know this about your platform. I will go back and I will work on episode 4 free.
That is insane. So you're actually,
but it makes so much sense because you have to also understand the watching experience of a medium or of a format before you write it, right? Like if you're watching a film, you're watching it in 2.5 hours, hopefully not more than now, and you're finishing it, right? But if your show is running on the, not that I think binging is extremely unhealthy, but I have to say that. But I'm saying that if your format is such that you have to make sure that they come back, keep coming back, then you obviously write to that effect. But having said that, cliffhangers are, I don't like stand for cliffhangers. I don't mind them, but I don't stand for cliffhangers necessarily, because your story should be overall interesting,
compelling, rather than just the last 4 shots.
Episode 3.
But this is interesting about the paywall also. I didn't think of.
Because I feel like we keep sitting here in our ivory towers and say, oh, we want to write good content, but please, we are not writing for ourselves. We are writing for consumption. And we have to respect that. A lot of writers, including me, have done that. That, oh, this is I feel like we need to, of course, you can't write what you don't sort of connect with. Sure. But at the same time, you have to understand, and this, I think, is the most important thing for us who are so-called conventionally feature writers, when they come into writing long format, is to understand the way that it is watched. Not just the beats of the narrative in terms of the actual writing craft, etc. The minute you are able to sort of understand how this will be watched, you'll you'll get that instinct to sort of do the beats and the rhythm of the structure in a way where you know that, oh, this will feel interesting. Again, it was fun because in Sacred Games, for example, of course, there were episode ends which were hopefully intriguing. But like Varun had this thing that, let's not, like, slow burners fine, cliffhangers are nahi hai. So he came with a lot of confidence to sort of respect the material overall, sort of thing, which was fun. But at the same time, I don't mind cliffhangers. Sometimes they're like, what the hell, I need to know what happened. And that is sometimes the nature of the viewing. Like, you have to do it. And if you're doing it, then you should do it better. Like, Chernobyl had some great cliffhangers.
I also just want to kind of round off this session with something that we spoke about earlier. That with all this, I know you're in the middle of a deadline. We've kind of somehow managed to make space for this session between.
That's just my lalach to see you. That's all. Like, talk to me, dude.
That too. But I know that it is the kind of deadlines we're working with, and we're both like, okay, thank God, there's a lot of work. We'll start with that. But it has been exhausting. And we spoke about a work-life balance. How are you? Are you able to firstly maintain a work-life balance?
For the most part, I am. Because last few months have been a little sort of all over the place. And like I said, that's a good problem to have. So I'm not complaining. But for the most part, I don't know. I think it's just, maybe I'm not hardworking enough. I don't know what it is. I like to sort of have weekends be treated as weekends. Like, not that I won't work on a Sunday. If I have a deadline, I will. But that's I try and sort of keep, and I feel like after a point, maybe unless you're like a workaholic and you really enjoy doing that, I feel like you're after a point you're able to uh, take on take on work, enough work that will obviously be good for you and you will be able to manage, but also sort of uh, find a routine. I think it's about finding a routine maybe. And not that it's not like it's a lag raha hai ki I've got it all figured out. I haven't. Like I said, in 3 months, like I've not slept in good times and all of that. But I think the good thing with me is that I can't work late into the night. It's just like it's my physical problem. It's not like I choose to do it or anything. I just can't. So automatically, the minute you sleep for 7 hours, work-life balance already is like halfway there.
You're lucky like that.
Yeah, I'm touch wood. I'm
an
lucky.
insomniac, so it's really hard for me to sleep in the first place.
Oh, so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear that. No, that is touch wood. I think my luckiest sort of thing. And then, like I said, I actually enjoy Sundays. I enjoy not doing anything.
But so, I want to ask you one last thing, and it's just like
I'm sounding like one Sadhu Baba. It's not like that, but I don't know. I guess I take on only as much as I can sort of.
No, but that's great actually. But I do want to ask you that, and this is just like a random thing that I have been thinking about a lot. Probably applies again to editors and writers a lot because, as I said, we kind of work into oblivion, and there's time to tinker around with stuff day in and day out. Do you strive for perfection? Are you a perfectionist and you'll kind of keep going at it till you reach a point? I ask this because I was reading somewhere that perfection is a trauma response and it's not like the best thing to aspire towards. So
I think you put it up on Instagram.
I had, yes. Because I was just, back in the day, I was like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. I'm not going to let go till. But there's no concept of perfection because it's so subjective.
Absolutely. And writing में तो कहाँ आएगा perfection? मतलब आ ही नहीं सकता. But you have to be, I don't know, you have to be like really Charlie Kaufman, maybe. And maybe then.
Yeah.
Maybe. But but yes, there is a certain, like, sometimes I read other people's work, like sometimes people send you stuff saying that, oh, I want to do dialogue for this screenplay. And I'm like, yeah, okay, send the screenplay. And then I read it and I'm like, ये इनका fourth draft है? ये क्या है? So, I feel like, sometimes I feel like, it's perfection, of course, is impossible, and what can you do? But I do think that the least you can do is read your draft before you send it out. Usme automatically that first draft will become second draft for you, which will be the first draft that you send. So I think I do like to I do like to sort of feel like a little happy about it. Of course, you never really like what you've written. That never happens with me. I envy the people who come into a meeting saying, "Yaar, kal maine bahut अच्छा scene likha." Want to hear? I don't have that confidence. I wish I did. Where I go and I command that kind of thing that, listen, you have to hear what I wrote. I can only do that with my husband, I think. बहुत अच्छा scene likha. उसको ही मैं बोलने की ऐसे मतलब I don't have that. So, but at the same time, I feel like it's important for you to feel happy about what you send out, and it can't just be for deadline. Then you might as well, why are you doing this? If you're not happy, if you're not excited about sending that email out saying that this draft is ready, what is the point? But at the same time, the beauty of our work is that it's a draft. It's always a draft.
It's always a draft, yeah.
Yeah. That is now one thing that, because even if you've written it and it's going on shoot, you know that shoot pe bhi ek line change kar sakti hu. Which is not the case with you. So then I think for you, it would be even more that, one more day. Because ek din, but doesn't matter for the person who's receiving it, unless like it's a sort of a fire. But for you in that one day, you'll do like 20 hours of work and then you break your back, but you would have maybe fixed 1 second of
Yeah.
the of the but that's the thing. Like I also
Yeah.
can't help. I
But
can't
it
help
is technically, I think for me at least, I think it's still a draft, because even when I find it very difficult to watch something
Yeah.
I've edited, unless like I
Oh,
watch,
after it's done.
yeah, it's very troubling. So I wait. There are very few things I've watched almost immediately.
That's very interesting because many times that has happened with me.
Because then I'm like, this is still a draft.
Yeah. Same.
So I have
Same.
to really
Exactly.
forget about the process. Once I've put the process behind, then I'm like, okay, now I can probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question for you. Where when you edit and then when the writer comes and sees it, do you feel like they're gonna kill you? Then what do you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless
Like
the
has it
writer's
been
a no, but unless the writer's a friend, then it's easier. But I remember one of my very early projects, the writer came in for the screening with like notebook and pen. So then I was like, oh my god,
oh, oh
this
God.
is that's really
Yeah, but
unnerving.
that sounds like something that I would do, yeah. Shit.
Pooja, I'll kill you if you do that. It's so unnerving because there's been one whole stage of shooting that's come in
Yeah.
between. So it's yeah, and then they're like, oh, but this was, yeah, then there's that little interrogation that happens, but
Why have you done this?
this was not the intention. Why did you drop that scene? Why did you drop this scene? But that was not, this is not how it should be. um that even I know. But there are, as you yourself mentioned, that there are variables a lot of times what can be fixed 100%. If like I've got the tone wrong, which is entirely possible, then, or the
Yeah.
intention is not coming across, then, and it's fixable, then 100% we will work to address it. But if
Yeah.
it's something obviously that's gone wrong on shoot, it sometimes it's hard to
Mm.
explain why,
Mm.
unless you kind of revisit rushes and you share the rushes and you say that this is what it is. It is
Mm.
a difficult thing, but I find it really unnerving. I think it's better now because even writers, I think, are understanding like that we are all working with again very stringent deadlines and very stringent sort of formats now, even with
Yeah. Yeah.
theatricals. You
Yeah.
have to be working now like within certain durations and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a little I think easier now for everyone to kind of understand each other. And
Yeah.
again, why I wanted to talk to you in the first place is also to clarify and understand the other side, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes, most time, like writers, editors probably don't communicate as much,
Yeah. I
and
never meet.
never meet because we can't, because
Because
you're
it's like,
writing, I'm editing.
no, but it's like they're in parallel universes of the
Yeah.
same, of the
And-
same
Yeah,
film.
yeah, exactly. And which is strange because we're actually, again, our work is so similar. But
Exactly.
and I do wonder why writers and editors are kept away so much. I think if anything, editors should be part of writers' rooms. That would
In
be,
fact, I feel that. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
Go on.
yeah. No, just that I feel like it would really help everyone if editors are brought in that early. वो
Yeah.
अलग बात है कि हम लोग को शूट शुरू होने के 10 दिन बाद कई बार onboard करते हैं. But
Correct.
it would definitely, I think, I would love to be able to participate.
Yeah, I think it's important that during the writing process, especially for a long format, film
हाँ,
के लिए तो होना ही चाहिए,
of
but
course.
especially for a long format because so much changes on the table, no? And
Yeah.
we're talking about, of course, what can be fixed and what writers say that this is not how it was, and then you say that we fixed it to the best we can. But at the same time, sometimes it's also reinterpretation of a scene which actually works. And sometimes writers can't because you've written it, you're so close to the material, you can't see it any other way. But I've seen this happen. I've seen that I'd written one scene which was interpreted very differently when it was cut. And initially I was like, what the hell? But I had some distance, and then I saw and I said, yeah, it makes sense. And you're able to sort of see it like you are as in the editor is able to see it differently because you've not written it, right? And sometimes that helps. And I feel like it's important for writers to understand that, like I said, films are not what they have written. Films or whatever shows are what is, performed, shot, directed, and then cut, and then all of that. So it's otherwise then you write a book and then you shop it around for show rights.
Yeah.
And make money.
No, that's true. That's true. Because actually, with like writers, particularly, I found it. There's one script that came to me, and they also sent me a video of the writer narrating, which I found very helpful. Because you kind of get the tone and you get the pacing, and sometimes, like if you're cutting and you want to revisit, then you have you may or may not follow. That's a different thing. But you know what the original intent is. So I think that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because nowadays, like how we also write and try to edit along with the writing, right? Like many times we'll finish a scene in the middle. Now, maybe a few years ago, I would have written the entire scene and let you cut it. But now I want to decide where I want to cut it, and say, for example, where is Antara? And the question is never answered in the scene, and you cut to what Antara is doing. So that's something that we probably did not do a few years ago. And the economy of pages is sort of something that is now teaching us that. So it's interesting. That is one thing which I feel is very interesting. And another very interesting thing, which Nihit's mother, Nihit is my co-writer from Sacred Games, and his mother, when she was watching the show, there's one thing which she said that, of course, she doesn't watch maybe as much content as we do, the kind of content we do. So she found one thing very intriguing, where she said that one scene is happening and two people are talking, and suddenly you hear a third voice of another person talking, and that is actually the sound forward from the next scene. Which is actually an editing technique, right?
Yes.
She's like this. Initially, she found it very disorienting. Then she caught on that, this is like a sort of a thing. So these are things that also which we use in the writing now, right? I use sound forward very often to sort of get into the scene. Like I'll write the first part of the next scene's dialogue into the previous scene. So I feel like it's important to understand how editing, writing, all of that sort of fits into each other.
I
think it's fun. It's like like when Sacred Games was also being edited, we were shared episodes as and when they were editing, and then we would send notes. And then some of all sort of happened with a lot of synergy. So eventually, it's fun, because editing I feel is what finally you're doing at the end of it. Fun.
No, true. And I think, as you said, that it's always about finding the synergy between writing and editing. I think that's what will ultimately, make for a really good film or series.
They're both like such lonely jobs. Like sitting alone in one room. Batman's cave.
I think if anyone can understand a writer's woes, it's probably an editor.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much. This was really, really lovely. And a lot of questions that I had for you. Thank you so much for answering so clearly and so beautifully that it's really, I think, going to help me in, especially with like editing and writing and collaborating on projects with writers. I think it's really going to help me understand the other side better.
If you enjoyed this video, then please like it, share it, comment on it, and subscribe to this channel so you're tuned in for our upcoming episodes.